Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay. I'm from Women Who Explore. I don't know if I'm in the speaker view or not. I can never see you when I'm recording these things. So anyways, we're joined tonight with Norco Dirt Series owner Megan Dennis, who is going to be leading this class for us. I'm super excited about this. If you guys want, one fun thing we always like to do is in the chat, just drop where you're tuning in from. It's super cool to see like kind of where everybody's coming from. And then just as a reminder, we record these classes. So if you want to leave your camera off, you're welcome to. I am going to make sure everybody's muted. And if you do have questions throughout, you're welcome to drop them in the chat and then we'll just kind of go, we'll answer them as we go. And then at the end, we can have another kind of Q&A thing going on as well. So I personally am in Eugene, Oregon. So I'm super excited about this class because I am a mountain and road biker at times. I'm newer to the sport, but I really like, in all honesty, my ex was the big biker. That's how I got into it. And I don't know anything about how to take care of my bike. So this is going to be such a great class, I think. And I'm just really looking forward to this. So Megan, thank you so much for taking time to share this, your knowledge with us tonight. So I'm going to let you take over and get started, and then I'll just pop in if we have questions, and I'll continue to let people in. So away we go.
Good. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Meg from Norco Dirt Series. I'm the owner, but I'm also a giant bike nerd who's learned a lot of this myself, but I've also been taught by some really incredible mechanics throughout my journey. So I have a great little curriculum for us to learn today to build our confidence with our bikes, to build our comfort with our bikes, and all in all, just feel a little bit better about playing around with these crazy machines that we've invested in and feeling like we're a little bit more capable and ready to hit the trails and take care of our bikes. So I'm going to get started. One thing that we're going to drop into the chat for everyone is a link to a document that I've made for all of you, which has some bike terminology and parts in it. So if you want to follow along, if you're unsure about what those parts are that I'm talking about, and it has great little images, kind of like this one, where it's a bike with all the labels of the things you need to know. And then we also have a tire pressure chart and a tools for your ride file that we're going to follow along with just to help make us feel a bit more comfortable with all of our gear. So I'm going to get going. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the tools that we need in our garage or at home, in our kitchen, whatever works for us, wherever we work on our bikes, to feel a little bit more comfortable and capable. And the first thing that I'm going to recommend that everybody has at home is a set of loose Allen keys. So this is my favorite set. I'm a little bit of a color freak, but also these are just really great set that I use. And this has all of the different sizes of tools that you need to be able to take care of your bike from a high level at home. What you also need to have at home, or what we always recommend, is a floor pump. So a floor pump is a pump that's a nice, big, easy to use pump. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the how to take care of our tires and how to pump our tires portion. And these floor pumps, you can get two different types. You can get some that have a digital gauge like this one, which are extremely accurate, and some that have a little dial adjustment gauge that are a little bit less accurate, but still a fantastic way to take care of our equipment. So with those two tools, we are in fantastic shape to start taking care of our bike and start working on our bike. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is how to set up our brake levers for us. So I'm going to pull out this beautiful Norco Sight, an amazing bike that we use at Dirt Series in our demo fleet. But we're going to talk about how to set up our brakes to fit our hands. So just like in a car, you know, in your car, you set your seat up, you set your mirrors up to fit you. But something that we always forget about is actually setting up our brakes to fit our hands. So to do this, the first thing we do is we set our hands on our grips in a nice, comfortable position. It's typically pretty close to the end of our grips. And then we put our fingers straight out. When we put our fingers straight out, we should be able to reach the hook of our brake lever. So the hook is this portion on the brake lever that has a little curve, and that's meant to actually catch your finger and hold and keep your finger in place. So when we do this, and we extend our fingers to hit that hook, if we can only fit one finger there, our brake lever is in a good position. But like this second side, I can actually fit 2 fingers to get to my hook, which tells me that my brake levers aren't set up for me. So I need to adjust this side to fit my hand. To do that, we're going to grab our tools. So this is where you're going to get the Allen key that fits the screw that is on your brake lever, and you're going to loosen it a little bit. When you loosen it, it's going to give you the ability to move that lever across our bike. So I'm going to go a little looser. So then we can move this thing left and right until we get it in the right position. And I'm going to set this up so that it's in the right position for my finger to hit that hook, just as we discussed. Once I've got my finger in that right position, I'm going to make sure that it's also turned downwards. The reason we turn our levers downwards is because when we're in our ready position on our bikes and we've got a nice, big, strong body position, we want to make sure that our wrists are pointing downwards. We're not bending our wrist where we might have an angle in it. Instead, I'll show you with my nice wrists visible. I'm looking for a straight arm instead of a bent arm like we see in that side. So once I'm at the right angle, I'm going to then take my Allen key again, and I'm going to tighten that brake lever into the right position. And when I tighten up that brake lever, I want to make it hand tight, which means you've done the screw snug, but then we're going to give it one more quarter turn to really make sure it's tight enough, but not so tight that you've had to really crank that Allen key around. So once it's in the right position, now I have to think about what we call the reach. So the reach is how far you have to literally reach with your finger to get your finger into that hook position. So many different brakes out there are going to have different positions that the reach can be adjusted to. These TRPs have this great little knob that you can turn to bring what we call the reach in and out. But in some brakes, we also may have to use a really tiny little Allen key. And it may have a little screw hole that you can put it in to turn this forward and back. But the goal that we're doing with our reach is to actually try and get our brake lever to hit right about that last knuckle in our finger so that we can really comfortably wrap our finger around the lever. My hand on the right side, I can't quite get my finger over there. So I'm going to adjust my reach just to make sure that it's a little bit closer so I can get my finger around nice and safely so that anytime I need my brakes, they're quick, they're in the right position, and my hand feels fantastic. So I'm going to check our comments just because it's a little far away. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so setting up our brake levers. If there's anything you take away from today's session, this is probably the most important thing, which is why I cover it first, because as soon as you feel great and confident and like you can feel and reach those brakes with comfort, it creates so much control and stability and just general empowerment on our bike. So please make sure your brake levers are set up to you. If you feel like they're not quite perfect, you can always pop into your shop. They can always help you, but this is just the most important thing ever on a bike. So I like to start there. So the next thing that we're going to cover is going to be talking about tire pressure. The tire pressure, I always find, is such an important topic because people often don't realize that tire pressure can make or break the difference on our bike. And the difference that we get with having great tire pressure is that it gives us control, it gives us grip, and it can also ensure that our bike is best set for any terrain that we're riding on. So something that all of you are going to have in that package is a tire pressure chart. So I made this for everybody. I do want a giant word of warning. This is a guideline. This isn't perfect. It's not an exact science, but it's a really great starting point that we use even at camp or anytime we set up our participants' bikes when we're out on private lessons. And it just helps us feel a little bit more confident that our tire pressure is right for us. So there's a couple things that matter. first and foremost, what matters is we have to pump our tires every single time we go for a ride. This isn't something that you do once and then you forget about, or you let the other person in your household take care of for you. This is something that we 100% can do ourselves. And we do this by making sure that we have our floor pump available and our handy tire pressure chart. And what we do is we look for our weight and we look for our wheel size. So our wheel size can be found on our bike, and it will be either 26 or 29 or 27 and a half, and it's often printed on our tires. So if you look at your tires, it'll say, like this one, for example, says 29 times 2.4. So 29 is the wheel size, and then the tire width is 2.4. So on this chart I've made for everybody, we've got 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6. Those are the most common mountain bike tires, especially nowadays. So you can use the one that's closest to your tire, or if you really have some great questions about it, you can always message us on Instagram. We can help you a little further. But the key is that we want to set our tire pressure based off of what we're riding, based off of the tire size, based off of our weight. But then we also want to think about the weather. So on the side of our tire pressure chart, we talk about the style. So I've got some adjustments you can make for e-bikes. If you have tubes or tubeless, which is something we're going to talk about in a bit, whether it's really wet out, whether it's really dry out, if you're riding sharp rock, or if you're riding roots. All those different terrain types can impact how much tire pressure we should use. The reason they impact that is over something that is going to be really hard or really slippery or really wet, we want to make our tires harder or softer to help accommodate with that. So with that tire pressure chart, we use that as a starting point. We get our tires pumped for every ride. But to pump our tires, for those of us who might not feel that confident with it, I'm going to give us a quick little demonstration. So we have two different types of pumps. We have pumps that have ends that look like this. This is a screw-on end. So we screw this on to our tube. And then we have pumps that have ends that look something like this. So the ones that look like this are a little bit quicker to use. They actually just snap out and snap on. And some of them have two little holes. And these are for different types of tires, or tubes rather. So there's two types of tubes out there. There are tubes called Presta. The easiest way to tell if it's Presta is it has a great little thing right at the end that you open up and you have to unscrew and you push it and you think, if I have to push it, it's a Presta. The other type that we see, which we're seeing less and less of, but it's still out there, is Schrader. So this is what a Schrader valve looks like. And this one has a tiny little indent on the inside. It's kind of hard to see at this angle, but it's much thicker and you can't unscrew anything. Once you've determined if you've got Presta or Schrader, then you're going to actually put your pump onto your tube and you're going to make sure it's screwed in nice and tight, and then you're going to pump up to the appropriate air pressure. From there, we do want to remember, as I mentioned at the beginning of this topic, every single time we go for a ride, we pump our tires because our tires are going to lose air pressure. And so this is something we want to make sure that we keep up, because if we care as simple as having, 17 PSI in the front of our tire, we want to make sure that it's always at 17 PSI. So it's just allowing us to have that exact number so that we feel really confident about it. And I'm just looking at some questions here. What PSI do I recommend for junior riders? So this is definitely a complicated question because it does matter what size their tires are. There's a whole bunch of great calculators on the internet out there. I don't have the exact answer for you right now. However, the general rule of thumb is the smaller your wheel is and the lighter your weight is, the less tire pressure you need. So if you're a 100-pound rider on a 27.5-inch wheel and you have a 2.4-inch width tire, then you only need about 20 pounds in the front of your tire. So pounds is PSI, which is pounds per square inch. So if you have a little one who weighs less than that on a smaller wheel, you can take out some air pressure from there. So without knowing the exact, I'd say probably somewhere in the range of 15 pounds. But this is like a very random shot in the dark for you. And yeah, this chart's going to be shared for everybody. It's in the PDF that you're going to get a link to so that you can take a look. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is tubeless tires and tubeless care. So tubeless tires. What are tubeless tires? Tubeless tires are tires that do not have one of these beautiful tubes in. So if we don't put a tube in it, it's what we call tubeless. If you're not sure, you don't feel confident with that, you can pop into the bike shop and ask. There's also some tricks that we can talk about in our questions after. But tubeless is something where we essentially put something in it called sealant. So this is an example of some of the sealant we used here in our shop. And that sealant is kind of like glue that you put in your tire that needs to stay liquid. While it's liquid, if you get a puncture in your tire, let's say you go over something sharp or you live in the desert and you ride over a goat's head and it pierces your tire, sealant will actually seal that hole. And when it seals that hole, it allows you to continue riding without losing a lot of air pressure or having a flat. One of the most important things with tubeless is you have to put new sealant in it regularly. So this has to be done at least once a year. And if you don't know the last time you put sealant in your tire, it's time to put some more sealant into it. And there's some great tools out there to do this. The first thing that you need is you need a valve core remover tool. So a valve core remover tool, typically you can get for free or very little money at the bike shop. Kind of looks like this little guy, and it's kind of hard to see just with my background, but it's a little tiny tool with a hole that goes around your valve stem. There's other tools, including multi-tools out there that have this built into the end of the multi-tool, or sometimes we even have it on our actual valve cap. So some bikes come with fancier caps on them and they've got a tool built into them. What that tool's for is actually taking out what we call the valve core, which is that part where we have to open up to fill air. So when we take it out, we can use something like this, which is a sealant syringe, where you literally suck up some of that glue, you put this onto your tire once it's the valve core once it's opened up, and then you push in that new sealant and it's done. Then you fill it up with air and you go let it seal and glue up. This process is a generally pretty easy process, but it's also something that can be done really quickly at the shop. I do recommend that once a year we make sure that we have new sealant in there. And we do have to remove old sealant. So this is where it can get a little bit messy because it kind of turns into like a browny, whitey, greeny goo ball that needs to be removed from our tire. If you ride a lot, we do recommend you put in sealant a little bit more frequently. So maybe twice a year, or if you live in somewhere like Calgary, Alberta, where I am, where it's very dry here. And so we sometimes need to actually put more sealant in where it's drier because you can get more dirt and dust and just the air pulls out all that moisture. So sealant is a super important thing to replace regularly on our wheels, and it's something that we have to do at least once a year. So if you don't know, time to check it out and maybe put some more sealant into your tires. I'm going to check our questions here. This is a great question. So how do you know when the sealant is the problem versus needing new rim tape or having crusty sealant? In general, if you haven't had a major crash or a dent in your rim, or you haven't had any damage done, it's probably not your rim tape. On that note, it may actually be your tire. And something that we're not going to talk a ton about today, but sometimes our tires wear out, and this happens quite frequently the more we ride, and you're actually going to start to see cracks in your tread of your tire. Those cracks mean that your tire is drying out or wearing out. And this is a really important thing to note. So either your tread is worn out, which doesn't happen very often, you start losing things like side knobs, or you see lots of cuts and scrapes, like this side knob starting to kind of wear away, or they start to get really dry and crusty. That's a good sign that your tires are actually done. And then no matter how much sealant you put in there, they're just not going to be soft and pliable anymore. So it's not going to do much to help. So this is time to consider putting a new tire on your bike, as well as considering new sealant when you do that. For those of us, for how much sealant we put in, it actually says on the bottle. Typically, like a large bottle like this uses, I'm just looking at the back here, 60 to 90 milliliters or 2 to 3 ounces for one tire. So in this syringe that I was showing you, that's basically one syringe worth of sealant. You can go up to 2 if you're putting it in for the first time. And if you're just topping it up, you can do a little less. But we do need to make sure that we put the recommended amount that's in our sealant bottle into our actual tire. For those of us who bought a used bike and don't know if you have tubeless tires, so the easiest way, and this is not a surefire guarantee, so I'm going to show you quickly. On this wheel, we've got a tiny little metal circle up here. This tiny little metal circle, if it comes off pretty easily, is a pretty good indicator that it's a tubed tire. But if it doesn't come off easily, then I recommend you take it into the shop and they can help you find out if it's tubeless. And if it's a really big, thick valve stem end, then it's very likely it's also tubeless. So the quickly. And then how we know when a tire is tubeless compatible. So all tires are tubeless compatible, but not all rims are tubeless compatible. So if our rim doesn't say tubeless ready on it or no tubes on it, like this one says, then it probably isn't. But sometimes you can add rim tape to it. So it's important to go to the shop and talk to them. It's not a quick and easy answer. One type always works or the other type doesn't. This is something that if your rim doesn't automatically say it, it may not be set up for tubeless. So you'll have to take it into the shop to put rim tape on it to make sure that it is a tubeless ready rim. Awesome. So I think that covers all of our tire related questions and our sealant related questions. So the next topic that we are going to talk about is actually how to clean our bikes. So cleaning our bikes is a whole nother thing out there that we often are not the best at. Some of us may have bike fairies. I have a bike fairy who is helping me today with the care of it. So to clean our bikes, there's a couple of things that I really want to recommend as a high level, like please don't do this. And the first thing is never take your bike to a car wash. Never take your bike to a car wash or through on the rack in a car wash. And please don't ever use a pressure washer on your bike. The reason we don't do that is you can put a lot of damage onto very delicate parts of our bike, and we can actually cause more harm than good. So the best way to clean our bikes is with a garden hose in the backyard or a bucket of water and a rag. The first thing that we do is we try and purchase some bike cleaner. So I've got a couple different bottles of ones that we use. Bike cleaner is the best. There's lots out there that are biodegradable or they're environmentally friendly and they're a little bit better. But if you don't have bike cleaner, but you need to clean your bike up, the next option is just some dish detergent in a bucket. So lots of water, a little bit of just like Sunlight dish detergent, a couple drops of that, and that will be enough to clean your bike. Because the point is we're taking dirt and a little bit of grease off. We're not trying to strip our bikes down. The next thing we need to do is using either a rag, like a nice microfiber cloth, and a nice soft brush. When I say soft brush, I really mean soft. Like this is one that does not hurt, it does not scratch if I use it. And the reason we use a soft brush is because anything rougher can actually scratch up our frames and damage our bikes. So soft brush helps us to brush that mud and grime off after we have saturated our bike with some water. But there are other tools out there you can use. So we have different types of brushes. Like this one is a wheel brush. It's a little bit rougher. It helps to get some of the, tougher stuff off around our spokes and kind of in on the rims. And another tool out there is a chain cleaner. So this is a chain tool for cleaning our bikes. And the way we use this one is we just put it over our chain after we've gotten it wet with some soap and water. And we literally just run our bike chain around on it, and it helps to get all of that dirt and grime and grease off of our chain. Once we have cleaned our chain with that nice gentle soap and water or bike spray, then we're going to actually fully clean our bike down. We're going to wipe it down with a microfiber cloth or paper towels or whatever. Even old towels that I've stained like with bleach in the house. I just used old rags and towels I have around the house to clean the bike. But the last thing after we've cleaned the bike is we actually need to lubricate our chain. So I do want to debunk one myth, and the myth is actually the myth of the WD-40. This is not bike lube. This is not to be used to lube your chain. This is great for taking grease off of your chain if you've got really bad grease or lubricating points on your bike that are really squeaky, but it is not chain grease. So please don't use this. If you use it on your bike, you do have to make sure you use a rag, wipe it right off. But what we're going to use instead of WD-40 is we're going to use chain lube. So there's different types of chain lube out there, but there are two different kind of styles of chain lube. There's dry lube and there's wet lube. Dry lube is used when we're riding in dry conditions, and wet lube is used when we're riding in wet conditions. So if it's raining and you live in the PNW, wet lube is your friend. If you live in the desert or you live in Calgary or it's dry out, dry lube is your friend. So all we're doing is picking a lube that's best for the environment we ride in most of the time. Doesn't mean you have to go out and you have to buy, multiple different lubes for your bike, but it is a great thing to have if you live in an environment or you ride year round where you might need wet and dry. Typically dry will do the trick everywhere. All it does is allows and collects a little bit more dirt and grease, and it doesn't shed as well. And so we try and use the right stuff in the right environment. So to lube our chain, what we're actually going to do is we're going to open up our chain lube and we are going to spin our bike backwards. So I don't know if we can see this very well. We're going to try. So we're going to actually just try and get a single drop of lube on all of the different parts of our chain all the way through. And once we've done that, we're going to take a rag, like a piece of paper towel or a shop rag, and we're actually going to lightly wipe it off. This isn't about getting it all off, but it's getting excess off so that it's not coating our chain. And once we've done that, we're ready to ride. When we wash our bike, as soon as we're done washing our bike, we lube our chain. This isn't something that you do every single time you ride, but it's super, super important that you do it every time you wash your bike. If you ride frequently, your bike's getting really dirty, or you're hearing lots of funny noises that might be coming from your chain, you could consider lubing it. It's not going to hurt it to lube more, but it's going to hurt it to lube less or not lube it enough. Yeah, so that is lubricating our chain and taking care of our cleaning of our bike. So the last thing that we're going to cover today is one of my favorite things to teach at camp. It's how to take off our back wheel and how to put it back on, because this one feels really intimidating for a lot of people out there, especially because it's got all these different bits and pieces. So I'm actually going to take the bike off of the stand and I'm going to show you my favorite way to remove our back wheel so that it's really easy and it feels straightforward every time. So bear with me. First thing I'm going to do is get my bike off the stand. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip my bike upside down. And the reason I flip it upside down is because it makes everything easier. So when I flip my bike upside down, I'm going to put it on the seat and put it down on the handlebars. We're going to make sure we're nice and centered. Awesome. So now that I've got my bike upside down, the next thing I need to do is I need to get my chain into the hardest gear. The hardest gear is actually the smallest gear. So we want to shift our shifter and we want to pedal our bike to get that chain into the hardest gear. Once it's in the hardest gear, now we're going to actually take off our back wheel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the right Allen key. If my bike happens to have quick release, I can use my quick release to remove it. I don't have an example of a quick release bike at this time, but I am going to remove my through axle with my Allen key by untwisting it. Take a minute to get this out. Once it's out, I'm going to put it away somewhere safe, dry, and not on the ground. So typically I'll give it to a friend, or I'll put it down on my glove or somewhere where it's not going to get dirty. So in this case, I'm going to put it down on a nice clean rag. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually lift up my derailleur. So there's two different brands that we typically see on bikes. We see Shimano and we see SRAM, and they're both a little bit different. This one that I'm going to show you on today, if I can see, is going to be a, well, I can't see this one. Shimano, thank you. And so for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to hold that hanger out. So I'm going to take it from being closed and I'm going to hold it all the way out. And when I hold it out, I'm going to lift my back wheel up. I'm going to make sure that my chain comes off. So I'm just going to lift this guy up, take that chain off, and take my back wheel out. So now my back wheel is out of the bike and I can load it up in the car. I can do whatever I need to do, remembering that we try not to put any weight on our derailleur, and we try to not touch our brakes while our back wheel is out. Really important things if you need to put your bike into a small space. But now comes the hard part, is we need to try and put our back wheel back in because we're ready to ride. So we're going to break down this hard part and we're going to do the same thing we just did in reverse. And we're going to first take our derailleur and we're going to pull it forward. When I pull it forward, I'm going to, with my other hand, lift my wheel into place. I'm going to try and get that chain around my easiest or hardest gear, the smallest gear. When I get it around the smallest gear, my wheel should just drop right into place and I can let my derailleur rest. Once I've got that into place, sometimes it takes a little bit of jigging around. I'm not sure if you can see this, kind of a funny angle. Let me move that a little this way. You're going to feel it drop into place and it's going to feel really stable and comfortable. And when it's in that spot, now we can put our through axle in. If we have to force anything, sorry, can you? If we have to force anything, it means that it's in the wrong position. And so we're not actually set up in the right spot. So we don't ever want to have to force anything into our bike. Sometimes this takes a little bit of shaking, a little bit of wiggling, or just a little bit of overall lifting and unweighting our derailleur so that it feels like it's in a comfortable spot. So now that my wheel's in, I've got my rear axle in, I'm going to tighten it up until it's hand tight. I'm going to keep going. Once it's hand tight, now I'm going to give it 1/4 turn to make it nice and snug. So again, this isn't something that we're going to crank down as hard as we possibly can, but we do want it snug. This is something we want to check regularly. If we have a through axle that has a quick release on it, then we want to make sure that we set our quick release to always face the same direction when we're done. So I like to use the reminder backwards for the rear, and I like to have my front quick release flat against the lowers of my fork. When I do that backwards for the rear and front, we put it flat against the fork. It tells us that if it's ever moved, it needs to be tightened again. It's a really great visual cue to just have this as a reminder so that you know that if something's shifted, you can go tighten it down. It's so important that we make sure that our through axles are on properly, because that is safety and security on our bike. So now that we've got our through axles tightened down, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pedal to make sure that I get into the right gear again. So now I'm back onto my cassette, which is this nice large set of different cogs. And now I can flip my bike over and go for a ride. So I've covered how to actually get that wheel out, get that wheel back in, get it nice and tight, and then go for a bike ride. So in terms of high level topic, I know I've gone a little bit faster through this, but I thought what we could do is take the next 15 minutes or so and answer any other questions that we have coming on here. So I'm going to take a quick peek through some of our chat. So the first one that I've got here is, how often do I recommend cleaning the old sealant out? If you are changing your sealant, you should probably be cleaning out your old sealant. So this is something that I would do once a year. And I'll do it myself at home, but this is something you can take into the shop and just tell them you'd like a sealant refresh. They'll take your tire off, they'll clean it out, they'll put new sealant in it, and they'll send you away with some nice fresh sealant from there. The next topic that we've got here is, oh, someone's saying we've got a clean cassette. Thank you. This is a demo bike. It's still nice and clean. It has only been used a few times. But it is really important to keep our bike in good shape. We want to make sure our bike is clean. So if you have a really gunky and greasy cassette, this is something that I want you to clean. Get that dish soap, get that bucket, and give your bike a nice proper clean down and a nice the next thing that we have on here is how to clean tubeless tires. That's something where we're just going to scoop the goo out of there. And I say goo because it really does come out in goo. So if you've removed your tire from your rim, then you can actually get into where that sealant is. It usually sits at the bottom, or you might be able to feel it if it's really dried out. And then you can take your tire off of the rim, and you can actually scoop that stuff right out with a paper towel, and then I put it in the garbage. It's not something I recommend you throw on the ground, especially when we're Leave No Trace certified organization, but it's super important. Sealant is not often biodegradable, so please don't leave it on the ground. Try and use like Kleenexes or rags or an old t-shirt or anything you can do to not leave it on the ground if you have to do this on the trail. Another great question that we've got here is removing pedals with a pedal wrench. Which way to turn? It's actually something we can do pretty quickly. So there's two ways to remove our pedals. So many of our modern pedals have an Allen key opportunity on them. So that means that there's a hole on one side of the pedal where we can actually put an Allen key in there to remove it. So something really important with our pedals, just so that we can kind of zoom down a bit, is that our pedals actually go on reverse thread, which means that when we pedal forward, they tighten up backwards. And so to remove our pedals, we're going to put our Allen key in. And the way that I like to think about this, the easiest way, is you always pull up towards yourself while your pedal goes down. So if I wanted to remove this one, I should just be able to pull up and it starts to loosen off. That's going to be the same with our pedal wrench. You're going to pull up to loosen, and you're going to push down to tighten when you're standing over top. Another way you can do this, especially if it's pretty stuck, is you can stand beside your bike and you can put that Allen key back in there or get your pedal wrench on. And if it's really stuck, you can actually put your foot on the pedal and you can pull up on that Allen key. When you pull up, that gives you a little bit of push down, a little bit of torque, and then it allows you to get that off nice and tight, or nice and easily. One of the important things with pedals that people don't often know is that our pedals should not be done super, super tight on our bike. You saw how quickly and easily I could remove these pedals from my bike. As I'm pedaling, they're tightening up. So I don't need to put them on as hard as humanly possible. They're going to tighten every time I pedal. So they're always just hand tight. They should come off pretty easily. All right. Next questions we've got. Maintaining suspension pressure. So not that I don't want to talk about this one today, but suspension is a whole nother conversation that we can have. And maybe in the future, this is another conversation we can do. In general, we recommend that you check your suspension pressure quite regularly. This is something our mechanic would tell you he does every time he rides. myself being a slightly less bike crazy human, I check mine every 10 or 15 rides, and making sure that we write down our suspension settings so we know what they should be is a really great reminder. So I keep a note in my phone, or with Norco, we actually have the ride align settings that tell us where it should be set up to, which is an amazing tool out there for Norco bikes. But I make sure that I write down my settings so I know exactly where they are, so that if something's off, I can put it back to where I need it to be. One of our next questions is it okay to lube our chain right before riding? Yes, absolutely. Just remembering that once we've lubed our chain, we do wipe it off with a rag or something. So in my car, in the door panel of my car, I've got chain lube and a couple dirty chain rags where I can just wipe off that excess so that it doesn't collect dirt and dust and grime while I'm riding. But this is a fantastic practice to get into just before you go for a ride. And if you're not someone who keeps this in the side door of your car, then instead I always recommend you do it as soon as you're done cleaning or just before you go out for a ride. Another question, changing out brake pads. I would love to. This is another topic that comes with a little bit more work. The general rule of thumb is for changing out our brake pads, you have to take your wheels off. When you take your wheels off, then you it is a little bit more detailed, and I don't have all the right tools out to show you how to do this, but it is something that we can do in the future if there's interest in this. And then finally, how to clean the cassette. The best way to clean your cassette, again, is with a nice soft spray from your garden hose, a little bit of bike cleaner or soap and water. Another thing you can buy, which is out there that is great, and I will use it periodically myself, is drivetrain cleaner. So it's spray or kind of like a degreaser that's specific for the drivetrain portion of our bike, which is just pointing kind of down at that bike there, is this part here where we use this to drive our bike. So that's our cassette, our derailleur, and our chainring. So with that drivetrain, that cleaner will help to kind of get all of that grease and goo off of it. And there are specific brushes that can help with it. Yeah, so they tend to be a little bit more of a stiff brush because they're going to get into all of those cracks and crevices on our cassette. They have like ultrasonic tools that they can use, or they can take it off of your wheel and they can do a more dramatic clean for you. A little reminder with cassettes, these also wear out, and this is something that we do want to replace on our bike. If you ride quite heavily, I'd say every 2 to 3 years or even earlier, as much as 1 year if you're a really heavy rider. So this is something that wears on our bike. Another one of those parts that if we don't change it, it can really make our riding experience a little less positive. So it's a great thing to ensure that we do improve on those pieces on our bike. And then we've got another great question. I tend to knock my derailleur out almost every ride, and it skips or jumps gears. There isn't particularly a quick or easy way to adjust this on the fly. What that typically tells me is if you're constantly dropping out of line with your shifting or with your derailleur, you may have bent your derailleur hanger, and it may be time to go get a new derailleur hanger for your bike, which is a part that attaches basically from your through axle to your derailleur. There's a tiny little part in there. It's about this big, and it's actually called a derailleur hanger. And if that's bent, that typically means that your shifting is always going to be out of line. There are something on our derailleurs called limit screws, high lows, and then there's also a B tension screw, which can be adjusted to adjust your shifting. But the first thing I would say is find out if your hanger is bent. From there, then you can address some of the issues when it comes to shifting, and that could include even just tightening your shifting cable with the barrel adjuster that's located on the shifter handlebars. Next one, how do we clean grime out of the crank from being on the car? This is one that is not an easy answer. What my husband, aka my bike fairy, and one of our other coaches at Dirt Series sometimes does is he does have waterless car wash that we'll use to clean our bikes, but it's not something that everyone carries. It's basically a spray. This isn't one, but it's a spray in a bottle that you can use without water to clean your bike. But we do not take it to a car wash or clean it off. We just use a rag, and if you even can dip it in a bucket of water and just wipe everything off, that's usually the best method to keep your bike clean while you're on the road. Do we have any other questions today? I think we're getting pretty close to our hour time limit today. Awesome. Well, I
Nice.
guess a couple things I'll give you as like high level takeaways for today. So everybody is going to get a couple setups of information. Oh, the last thing I want to cover in all of my little note sheets is tools that you should carry with you every ride. So super important. We don't like to go out on the trail on a ride without feeling prepared. Now that we've learned how to use some of our tools, I would love to explain a few more that we keep in our packs to make sure that we feel really confident on the trail. So the first one that I'm going to suggest that you absolutely should never be on a ride without is a multi-tool. So this multi-tool, the reason I love it, it's made by Crank Brothers, is it has pretty much every Allen key that you will need. So it's got all these different sizes, which gives us the opportunity to fix pretty much everything on the bike. What it also includes is it includes a screwdriver. It has two to be exact. So it's got a flathead and a Phillips, and this is used for different things on the bike. In addition, it has a Torx tool, which this one's kind of a strange one. So a Torx tool, I'll just put it behind my hand here, kind of looks like a star. It looks like a screwdriver and an Allen key, but it's not really either. And there are some things, typically brake levers or shifters have a Torx tool or screw, which just allows us to get a little tighter. So that's on there. With all of our other Allen keys, what's the most important thing on our multi-tool if we don't have that is a chain breaker. A chain breaker allows us to actually fix our chain while we're on the trail by removing a chain link or breaking it if it's bent or in a weird position it shouldn't be in, or we need to just generally take it off. And this chain breaker just allows us to put a chain in there and pop out one of the center pins. This is something at our camps is one of my favorite things to do in our evening maintenance sessions, where we actually practice breaking a chain, because it's not very often that you get to do that until it happens on the trail and you go, oh, I have a chain breaker, but I have no idea what to do with it. So we get to practice and try it. But to go with the chain breaker, we need to make sure that we carry a quick link. What a quick link is it's a tiny little link that connects one end of the chain to the other. They're specific to your chain. So if you have a Shimano 12-speed chain, you need a Shimano 12-speed quick link. If you have a SRAM 11-speed chain, you need a SRAM 11-speed quick link. The best way to tell if you are an 11-speed or a 12-speed or a 9 or an 8 or whatever is you actually count the number of cogs on your cassette. So you start from the big one, you work your way in and you count them. So if you have 12 of these cogs, then you have a 12-speed. And if you have 8, you have an 8-speed. And written on your derailleur in tiny font that I couldn't read while we were working earlier, it will actually say the brand. So this one is a Dior XT, which is Shimano. If it's SRAM, it'll say SRAM. It might be like an XO or a different kind of brand like that. Your chain has to match the brand of your derailleur, and it has to match your cassettes. So make sure that when you go into the shop to get a quick link, you get a quick link that is correct for your chain, and it's the number based off of how many cogs are on your cassette. The next tool that we need to carry is tire levers. So I always carry 3 tire levers. So I have my Schwabe tire levers here. These are a nice thick plastic. The thick plastic is required because it can take quite a bit of force to get a tire off of the rim, especially if it's flat. So we need, I always recommend 3 because 1 goes in while 2 are kind of being used to remove the tire. Or you always have a backup in case you forget one on the trail, or you just can't find that 3rd one in your pack. Like, we can't take a tire off with just 1. We always need at least 2. 3 is better. But if you have those really thin plastic ones that you can get from a whole bunch of different places, they're most likely going to break. So the thicker the plastic, the better. The gold standard for tire levers is actually a metal core tire lever, where it actually has metal in the center. But the key with the metal tire levers is the end can't be metal. It needs to be plastic wrapped, because this metal end can really severely damage your rim. So if you are using a metal tire lever and maybe you have a carbon fiber rim, there's a good chance you could accidentally crack your rim, which is not repairable. So it can completely damage your rims. So I recommend 3 Schwabe plastic tire levers, good thick plastic, and then you always have enough to take that tire off the rim. To go along with that, we mentioned before that we need to carry a tube. So the tube, the best rule of thumb is to carry a tube that matches the size of your tire. If you're out with friends and maybe you forgot to bring a tube, or maybe you're tubeless and you didn't have a spare tube on your bike just in case, a great rule of thumb is that a 27.5-inch tube can fit in everything. So if your friend has a 27.5-inch tube and you're riding a 29-inch wheel and you need that new tube, you can just overinflate it. Or if you're in a 26-inch wheel and your friend only has a 27.5-inch tube, you can actually fold it so that it takes up less space and it fits into your wheel. So we always say as coaches to bring a 27.5-inch tube because it fits in everything. It's kind of like that universal, good enough on the big side, good enough on the small side, but the best practice is to always carry the one that fits your wheel. And then the last thing is our pump. So the kind of pumps that I absolutely love, Crank Brothers makes an amazing pump that I was super stoked as one of our sponsors that we all get to carry as coaches. But this pump is really small. And the cool thing is you can actually, there's little attachments so that it just clips on beside your bottle cage so that you don't even have to put it in your backpack. But why I really love this pump is because this pump has 2 features that are really unique. The first one is that it actually has the hose that you attach to your wheel to pump up, including a gauge that gets tucked inside so that you can put it on before you actually pump up your tire. But then secondly, the handle turns perpendicular. The perpendicular pump is way easier than pumping up and down like this. So from an ergonomics perspective and getting more actual pump action, it's much nicer to have one that you can adjust the pump to be across, and then you can just tuck your thing back in there and tuck it away. So the pump is a really great tool that we should always be carrying, regardless of whether we're tubed or tubeless. And then finally, the last and most important thing is that you always pack some snacks, because whenever you're frustrated, whenever your tire may go and you need to pump something up and we're tired, we're at the end of our ride, nothing is worse than being that friend who's angry trying to pump up their tire, but also having no food. So there's always 2 or 3 extra snacks in my pack just to make sure that everybody's happy and entertained along the way. So last couple questions. The last ones we have here is suspension pressure. So how you check it, we can really quickly talk about how to check it. To check pressure on our suspension, you need a suspension gauge. So this is actually called a suspension pump, and this is required to check the pressure on our suspension. So we'll zoom in really close. There's 2 ways to do this. To check the pressure on our fork, we have something up here called an air cap. So this air cap can be removed. And when it's removed, we're going to see underneath it, get this all off. There's a Schrader valve underneath that. So that valve in there, you can back up a little. We're going to attach our pump to it, and we're going to use our shock pump to check the air pressure using the gauge of that shock pump to tell us how much pressure is in there. So that's how we're going to check it in our fork. And then in our shock, we have a similar system. Just going to put this air cap back on. So on our shock, we're going to have another cap. It tends to be black, and it's located right here on this shock. And you just unscrew it. And underneath that shock is another Schrader valve where we're going to attach our shock pump and we can check the pressure there. My first recommendation with shock pumps and with pressure for pumps in general, for our suspension in general, is if you have a Norco, obviously go to the Norco ride align settings and figure out what the settings it recommends it is at, and then pump up your suspension to that. If you don't have a Norco, go to the shock manufacturer's website. Or the bike manufacturer's website, where they'll often give you a link to the shock that's on your bike or the fork that's on your bike, and it'll tell you recommended settings based off of your weight. So it tends to almost always be based off of your weight, plus a few other factors that they put in there, but using that setting is really important. Sometimes also on the back of our fork is a little chart, which is a starting point for our suspension as well. So you can follow suit with that chart if it happens to be on your fork, and you can start from there as well. So that's the easiest way to check our suspension settings. All right, the last one is, when you buy a chain, does it usually come with quick links? When you buy a new chain, yes, it does. However, if you, once you put the chain on, the quick link is used because that's what connects the chain together. So we don't consider that a separate quick link. We always want to carry one more quick link just in case our chain breaks somewhere that $15 part, depending on your bike shop, depending on your chain, but always make sure that you have a quick link that's not the one that just came with your new chain. All right. I think that's it. And I think we're coming up just a little bit off of 7:30, but we did it. We made it to the end. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out on Instagram. You can message us on our shared post for this amazing event. And thank you so much for listening to me, sharing a few things about bikes. I feel like I could do this for many hours, and I can always kind of spot check that we do lots of this at our camp. So if you want to learn more, come to a Norco Dirt Series camp. We're all around North America. They're super fun. But thank you so much for hosting us tonight and giving me the opportunity to share some of my tips and tricks with everybody.
Oh, thank you so much, Megan. This was amazing. My brain is on overload. I'm like, I have
Awesome.
so
Well,
much
keep
new
it high
information.
level overload tonight, but if you ever want to learn more and you catch me or any of our coaches at a camp, we love sharing bike and we love making it as approachable as possible, because we know these machines can be quite complicated, but we can build that empowerment and build that confidence with our equipment just by working together and getting hands-on and getting a little dirty. But it's well worth it to feel like we know exactly what we're doing on our bikes.
Awesome. So I think the only thing we have left is the giveaway for today.
Amazing.
Sweet. So let's see. Okay, so we're giving away a day at one of your camps.
So any of our camps, a one-day option. So you're just going to use the promo code for the winner that we're going to send to you, and that allows you to register for any one-day camp. And if you want to top it up to a 2-day, because we know you're going to have a blast, you can always top it up with us and talk to our office for that.
Nice. That's awesome. Thanks so much for donating that. I think that's such a cool opportunity, and I'm definitely going to hit one up this fall when I.
Amazing. So should I leave that to you to do the draw for that, and you'll reach out to the winner?
Well, we're going to draw here. So you're going to pick a number 1 through 35, and then we're going to just pick somebody who's here with us today.
Do you just want me to pick a number between 1 and 35?
Any random number.
Let's do 24.
Oh, who's it going to be? Danielle. Just Danielle. So Danielle, I'm going to shoot you a quick message. If you could email me at info@womenwhoexplore.com, then I will get you connected with Megan and her team to get you registered for your
Amazing.
exciting day.
Awesome.
So, cool. Yeah, thanks again. This was seriously so amazing. Oh wow, I just took your weekend in Squamish. Oh, she was just there. That's awesome. Great.
Amazing. We'll
Come
share with
back.
a friend or come to another one.
Yeah, sweet. Cool. Okay, well, great. Thanks again. This was just seriously so amazing. Oh, Danielle, I'll hit you up with an email. I sent you a private message, but I can send it to you again. And then if anybody needs anything or has any questions, you know where to reach us. So thanks so much for everybody for joining us. And thank you again for sharing, Megan. It was seriously such an
Awesome.
informative hour. So
Amazing. Thank you all for your attention. And I hope to see you all at camp at some point in the future.
definitely. And we'll get an email out with the link and a link to the recording once it's all done. So, cool.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you again.
Bye.